You know, poets have always been called the weird ones, the old dirty ones, the ones contained to a boring lesson in school, an upper-class novelty, over the head of urban youth unless accompanied by a scratch or bump or any other variation of a fat beat. Imagine the Phenomenal Woman remix or the ego-tripping B-side. These kids would know all the words. But behind the bars of paper and ink, most of our masterpieces remain unread and unworked, under fire and underrated, underestimated and untaught to those with the greatest need. Now it can't get much dirtier than that. That's the state of this empire called publishing, because they say poetry just doesn't sell.
If you ask most of the people of my generation what their experience with modern or contemporary poetry is, I always reflect back to the movie Love Jones, which starred Lorenz Tate and Nia Long. Love Jones did an excellent job of exposing the nation to the open mic arena, and New Orleans is home to about 5 poetry venues at least, and on any given night they house between 75 to 200 people. And that's what I realized in New Orleans. A lot of the poets and a lot of the really creative minds you have here are restricted to open mic, one night after another. And that inspired me to figure out what we could do if we took our creativity outside of our community.
You will not find the warrior, the poet, the philosopher, or the Christian by staring in his eyes as if he were your mistress. Better to fight beside him, read with him, argue with him, pray with him.
At Kenneth's house when we first started that, and it was so comfortable to be around each other. It's almost like sitting around with your family, because you're just eating, talking, getting to know one another, and you just find out that you have a whole lot in common with people that you never realized you did.
So, I mean, you know, I'm always drawn to people who are results driven. And I mean, and Kenneth had this attitude about, you know, being results driven. And I mean, and I just remember him saying that. And I mean, I never used to put it in those terms, but I mean, that's the only thing that's ever, you know, mattered to me is like, at the end of the day, what do you have? What am I holding?
It was a growing process because everybody was kind of rigid in the beginning, you know, kind of like with all of the hearsay and things going on, you know, like what is this for? Is this for the Poetry Hip Hop Coalition, or Ken trying to separate spoken word? And
as we started to continue having these evenings, it started to unfold a mission, a general purpose, and Kenneth began to share what his vision was.
What you do with your gift speaks life to people. You know, death and life on the tongue, and what you do speaks life. That's a form of ministry. The organized church, that may not be what you want to be like anyway.
God asked none of us to bear the burden of this world's redemption. And then still most of us walk around thinking that our burden is worth the world's attention, and I didn't come here to complain.
Being in different churches, what we started to do in the churches is reduce how many of those voices were listened to. You know, and then you have the poetry community that doesn't want to hear anything that has to do with the church. And so now they're angry with the church and not with God, but they tag it as if they're angry with God. Because the only God that they've ever known is the one that they've been taught. And the one that they've been taught says, look, if you don't look like this 8x10 picture, then you're not one of my children.
And I think we're trying to unite that creative talent and fellowship, and at the same time use it for purpose.
Two friends delight to be joined by a third, and three by a fourth, if only the newcomer is qualified to become a real friend.
There was a night at the Hard Rock where the host called multiple poets to the microphone. And the way open mics are set up, it's basically first come, first serve. You sign your name on the list, you get up to do something. One particular night, Dante and I had a piece that we wanted to share with the audience. So we came, signed up on the list, and we expected to be called up, you know, as a pair, you know, because the topic that Dante spoke on and the topic that I wanted to address coincided. So we asked the host to kind of call us up together. Well, she actually called Dante, myself, Brother Jamal D, and Anthony Hobbs to the microphone.
And it was weird because all four of us had talked so much individually as a group and so forth, but it was like for the first time we all acted at the same time. And we got to see the very thing we had been talking about, even though we had no intentions at that time of doing it. We did it. And I think that's when it became a reality. It was like, wow, concept becomes application, application produces reality, and it's like, boom, there we are, actually doing the things we've talked to each other about without a plan. And it's like, okay, now what do we do?
After I came back from overseas, I had the idea to get the four of us together in a more controlled environment, just to figure out if they saw and felt what I felt that night. And I looked at that the verse in Mark where Jesus was walking along the shore of Galilee. He calls two fishermen and says, "Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men." And that was symbolic because immediately after he called those two, he called two more. And so it started off with an initial 4 disciples. And that was symbolic of that night at the Hard Rock. But when we finally started to get together at my house and we went through what presentation and what each person was going to contribute, there was that hole that I felt when I was like, I need to get L. Edwards.
I am permanent, even as flesh passes away. I am righteous, even as I sin every day. I am forever seeking ways to praise, and I raise my gaze to where he stays, because that's where my help comes from. I am saved, I am loved, I am blessed, and I am whole.
First off, it solidified this brother's man of vision. He had a very clear idea what it is he wanted, he was going after, and I fit into that vision. So at that point, I'm thinking to myself, who am I to stand in the way? And I see where he's oriented, I see where he's going, I see the type of fruit that he's producing. So
when I thought of Fishers of Men Ministries, that was the umbrella that I wanted to work under to me. It was a reminder of why I do what I do and how I should go about doing it.
Grant me a new heart.
Do not keep this a secret. I don't tell you anything in confidence because I haven't learned to speak that language yet. This is love poetry because I love poetry.
I can start.
What would your life be? Ideally. See, mine would be one that keeps me closest to God most consistently. So that means that sometimes I have to suffer consistently. That means that sometimes I have to cry consistently.
If those pick down the boys knew that their parents had their back, they wouldn't have had to bust gaps in the middle of a high school gym. These children wouldn't need precious gems to feel precious. They wouldn't be tackling so much responsibility at adolescence because they wouldn't feel so alone.
So how can we promise them about tomorrow? We can't make today work for me and you.
My question is, what good does it do an impressionable congregation to hear a compassionate peace in favor of reparations coming from a militant who can't understand why his children's mother is taking him to court for child support? Or perhaps a word on self-discipline coming from the Muslim who snacks on pork rinds in moderation, or maybe even being prayed for by a Christian with crippled faith.
Many women that I've encountered select men like they're wearing a little red riding hood. Ooh, what big feet you have. It's better to kick you in your back when I'm mad. What big hands you possess.
Do I tell him a white man is like the grandfather too ashamed to claim him? No. Or do I tell him a black man is like the father too self-certain to claim him?
Since then, I take my public success and personal shortcomings in the same way. Found myself numb to some people's praise, so I give it all to God.
God turned the world's light on when he gave this gift to me. This gift of being able to see life through poetry.
As you look at me, I stand with like-minded poets, and we walk the earth as fishers of men. Now whom among you will walk with us?
So you can make